Hello and welcome. It's good to have you join me today as we explore something very precious to our Catholic faith, prayer. Prayer is our lifeline to God, our heart-to-heart with the Almighty. But sometimes prayer can feel a little daunting, can't it? Like we're not quite sure we're doing it right, or if our prayers are even being heard. Even the very first disciples of Jesus felt a bit unsure about prayer. They saw the way Jesus prayed with such natural confidence and love, and they longed to do the same. Are you ready? Let's begin. Before we dive into specific teachings, let's remember this. The most powerful lesson on prayer Jesus ever gave us was his own example. Throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus stealing away to pray, often in solitude, sometimes for hours on end. He prayed before making big decisions. He prayed to give thanks. He prayed in times of deep sorrow. Jesus, the Son of God, still made time for prayer. This tells us just how vital prayer is. So as we reflect on Jesus' teachings, let's hold on to this image of him as our ultimate model of prayer. The first thing Jesus teaches us about prayer might surprise you. He doesn't start with fancy words or elaborate rituals. He goes straight to the heart of the matter, our attitude. It's about approaching him with the right spirit, the right disposition. And that spirit, Jesus tells us, is humility. Humility isn't about thinking less of ourselves, it's about thinking of ourselves less. When we come to God with humility, we're not putting on a show or trying to strike a bargain. Jesus illustrates this beautifully in the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, Luke 18, verses 9 to 14. Remember the Pharisee? He stands tall in the temple, head held high, rattling off a list of his good deeds. He's practically bursting with his own righteousness. Then there's the tax collector. He stands at the back, head bowed low, too ashamed even to look up to heaven. He beats his breast and cries out, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." Because true prayer, Jesus shows us, begins in the depths of our own poverty of spirit. Humility is the bedrock upon which our entire prayer life is built. Without humility, our prayers become like seeds scattered on hard ground. They may look impressive, but they lack the depth to truly flourish. When we approach prayer with arrogance or self-righteousness, we're essentially putting ourselves in God's place. But when we approach him with humility, with open hands and an open heart, we create space for him to work in us. We acknowledge that he is the potter and we are the clay. We surrender our will to his, trusting that he knows what's best for us. So how do we cultivate this spirit of humility in our prayer lives? It starts with a simple but profound shift in perspective. It's about remembering who God is, the creator of the universe, the source of all love and goodness. And it's about remembering who we are, his beloved children, made in his image and likeness, but also flawed and broken, in constant need of his grace. Each time we come to prayer, let's pause for a moment and acknowledge our dependence on God. Let's let go of our need to be right, to be in control, to have all the answers. Let's quiet our minds, still our anxieties, and simply rest in the knowledge that we are loved beyond measure. He delights in our humility, and he'll be faithful to answer our prayer. Humility lays the groundwork for prayer, but Jesus doesn't stop there. He knew we'd have needs, desires, even fears we long to bring to God. And he encourages us to do just that. Ask, he says, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. Jesus wants us to come to him boldly, persistently, with the cry of our hearts. Think of it like a child asking a beloved parent for something they truly desire. The child might ask again and again, not out of disrespect, but out of pure trusting desire. That's the kind of heart Jesus invites us to bring to prayer. In the Gospel of Luke, we meet a woman we can all relate to, the persistent widow. This woman had a problem, an injustice she desperately needed resolved. But standing in her way was a judge, a man known for his cold heart and disregard for the vulnerable. Day after day she went to him, pleading her case, refusing to give up. Now, this judge wasn't God. He was the very opposite of our loving Father. But even this hardened, uncaring man eventually gave in to the widow's persistence. If even this unjust judge could be swayed by persistent pleas, how much more will our God, who is love itself, respond to the cries of his children? You see, sometimes the answer to our prayers isn't no, but not yet. God sees the bigger picture. He knows the desires of our hearts, often better than we know them ourselves. And sometimes he's working behind the scenes, arranging circumstances, preparing us, even protecting us from things we don't understand. This doesn't mean we should stop asking or that we can't express our disappointment, our frustration, even our anger to God. But as we bring our requests, let's also surrender our timeline to his. Let's trust that his timing is perfect, even when it doesn't make sense to us. So, the next time you're tempted to give up on prayer, remember the persistent widow. Remember that our God is not annoyed by our requests, but moved by our faith. He longs for us to come to him, to pour out our hearts, to trust in his goodness, even when we don't see the answers we're hoping for. Let your prayers be marked by boldness and humility, by persistence and trust. And let's encourage one another in prayer, knowing that when 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he is there in our midst. We've talked about approaching God with humility and persistence, but Jesus teaches us there's something even deeper at play in prayer, the state of our hearts. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking prayer is all about saying the right words, following the right formulas. But Jesus reminds us that God isn't interested in empty rituals or outward displays of piety. He desires our hearts. He wants us to come to him with clean hands and a pure heart, not in a self-righteous sense, but with a genuine desire to be in right relationship with him and with others. This purity isn't about being perfect or sinless. It's about having a heart that's turned towards God. When our hearts are cluttered with negativity, unforgiveness, or self-absorption, it's hard for our prayers to reach God's ears. Now, pure in heart doesn't mean we have to become like saints overnight. We're all a work in progress, right? We all carry our baggage, our hurts, our moments of weakness. But it does mean being honest with God about those things. It means bringing our brokenness, our struggles, even our ugliest thoughts and feelings to him in prayer. God's not shocked or repulsed by our mess. He's seen it all, and he loves us anyway, unconditionally. He longs to meet us there in the depths of our humanity and gently draw us closer to his own pure and loving heart. And that transformation often starts with a simple but profound act: forgiveness. Jesus knew that holding on to anger and resentment would be like poison to our souls, blocking the flow of God's grace in our lives. That's why he gave us some pretty direct instructions about forgiveness. He said, "Whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also, who is in heaven, may forgive you your trespasses." Mark 11:25. Now, forgiveness isn't easy, is it? It's not about condoning wrongdoings or pretending we weren't hurt. It's a process, a choice we make, sometimes over and over again, to release the bitterness, the anger, the desire for revenge that can so easily take root in our hearts. And here's the thing. Forgiveness isn't just about the other person, it's about us. When we hold on to grudges, we're the ones who end up imprisoned by the past. So, before we come to prayer, let's take a moment to examine our own hearts. Is there anyone we need to forgive, including ourselves? Are we harboring any resentment, anger, or bitterness? If so, let's bring those feelings to God. Let's ask him to help us let go, to heal the wounds of the past, and to fill our hearts with his love and forgiveness. Remember, we can't receive God's mercy if we're not willing to extend it to others. But when we do choose forgiveness, when we allow God's grace to work in our hearts, something remarkable happens. The walls that separated us from God and from others begin to crumble. Our prayers take on a new depth, a new power, as they flow from a heart that's been cleansed by the love and mercy of God. In our busy world, filled with constant noise and distractions, it's easy to forget the importance of solitude, of carving out quiet time for ourselves. But Jesus, in his wisdom, knew just how vital this would be. He understood the need for stillness, he tells us. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Matthew 6:6. Even Jesus would often withdraw to solitary places to pray. And if he needed that space, how much more do we? Your room doesn't have to be literal. It could be a quiet corner in your home, a park bench under a favorite tree, even a short walk in nature. Find a place to shut out the noise of the world and turn your attention inward, toward God. In those moments of quiet contemplation, we can be truly honest with God. And here's the thing about those quiet moments with God. He speaks to us in whispers, not booming pronouncements or dramatic declarations, but gentle nudges, intuitive insights, a deep sense of peace that surpasses all understanding. But if our hearts and minds are cluttered with the noise of the world, we'll miss those whispers. We'll miss the subtle ways he's guiding us, comforting us, inviting us into a deeper relationship with him. That's why private prayer is so essential. It's in the stillness, in the silence, that we tune our spiritual ears to hear his voice. Think of it like tuning a radio. If we're constantly bombarded by static, by interference, we'll never find the right frequency. But when we take the time to adjust the dial, to fine-tune our reception, we're rewarded with clarity, with a connection that transcends the noise. So, let's not neglect those quiet moments with God. Let's make them a priority, a non-negotiable part of our day, even if it's just for a few minutes. Let's find our room, our sacred space, and meet him there with open hearts and minds. And let's trust that as we do, he'll meet us there in the stillness and draw us ever closer to his loving heart. Remember the words of the psalmist, "Be still and know that I am God," Psalm 46:10. In that stillness, in that surrender, we discover not only who God is, but who we are, his beloved children, held in his loving embrace, finding our true home in his presence. We've talked about approaching God with humility, persistence, a pure heart, and in the quiet of solitude. But there's one more essential element Jesus teaches us about prayer: aligning our will with his. True prayer goes beyond simply asking for what we want. It's about seeking his will above all else, trusting that he knows what's best for us. God gave us free will, the ability to choose, to dream, to hope. But it does mean holding those desires loosely, willing to surrender them to his greater plan. Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane on the eve of his crucifixion. "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Matthew 26:39. Can you imagine the depth of love and surrender in those words? Jesus felt the weight of what was to come, the agony, the betrayal, the physical torment. He chose to surrender his will to the Father's, trusting that even in the midst of darkness, God's love would prevail. Praying thy will be done isn't about becoming doormats or resigning ourselves to a life devoid of joy. It's about recognizing that God's plans for us are far greater than our own. He sees the bigger picture, the intricate tapestry of our lives, and he longs for us to experience the fullness of life he intends for us. But sometimes that means letting go of our own plans and trusting in his wisdom. Let's ask God to help us surrender our will to his. Offer him our hopes, dreams, fears, and uncertainties. Make Jesus' words our own. "Not my will, but yours be done." It takes practice, patience, and trust in God's love. Our hearts align with his, bringing peace and joy. As we've journeyed through these beautiful teachings of Jesus on prayer, haven't you felt your heart stirred? It's amazing how he takes something we might think we know, prayer, and reveals its hidden depths, its transformative power. It's not about ticking boxes or reciting memorized phrases. It's about a relationship, a heart-to-heart with the God who loves us beyond measure. Think of it like a tapestry. Humility is the strong, sturdy threads that form the foundation. Persistence is the vibrant colors woven in and out, creating patterns of hope and trust. A pure heart is the soft, luminous silk that catches the light, reflecting God's love back to us. Private prayer is the quiet space where the tapestry is crafted, stitch by loving stitch. And aligning our will with God's is the master weaver's hand, guiding it all, ensuring it becomes a masterpiece beyond our wildest imaginings. As we weave these teachings into our lives, our prayer life will be transformed. It won't always be easy. There will be times when our hearts feel dry, when doubts cloud our minds, when the answers seem elusive. But let's remember Jesus, our constant companion on this journey of faith. He promised to be with us always, every step of the way. So let's approach prayer as a delight, a precious opportunity to draw near to God.